Good morning, this is Noor Shafiqa binti Muhammad Shafihi, student ID 0360457, presenting today's new segment on one of the most pressing issues of our time, climate change. Through this segment, we'll explore how monist and dualist legal systems shape the implementation of climate agreements, uncover challenges, and highlight solutions for a sustainable future. Let's dive in. Climate change is a global crisis that transcends borders, requiring collective action through multinational environmental agreements, MEAs, to reduce emissions and mitigate environmental harm. However, the effectiveness of these agreements depends not just on their adoption, but on how they are implemented across diverse legal systems. Countries operate under either monist or dualist legal frameworks, which fundamentally shape the way international commitments are incorporated into domestic law. Monist systems automatically integrate international law into their legal order, while dualist systems require additional legislative action to transform international agreements into enforceable domestic law. This structural difference creates significant challenges in ensuring consistent compliance with MEAs. Monist systems may face immediate conflict with domestic priorities or constitutional provisions, while dualist systems often experience delays in legislative incorporation and selective adherence to agreements. These issues weaken the collective impact of MEAs and threaten global efforts to combat climate change. In this new segment, I will critically examine how the differences between monist and dualist systems contribute to compliance difficulties, explore legal and practical challenges, and propose innovative strategies to harmonize international and domestic efforts. By addressing these systematic disparities, nations can strengthen the efficacy of MEAs and foster a unified response to the climate crisis. In monist systems, international law becomes part of domestic law immediately upon ratification without requiring any legislative transformation. This integration facilitates faster implementation of international agreements but also introduces unique challenges. For example, Article 25 of the German Constitution explicitly incorporates general rules of international law into federal law. Similarly, France adheres to a monist framework, treating treaties as directly enforceable upon ratification. The case of the certain German interest in Polish Upper Silesia (PCIJ) highlighted this principle, with the court emphasizing that international obligations prevail over domestic actions in monist systems. However, monist systems may struggle with legal conflicts when international agreements clash with constitutional rights or economic priorities. For example, a monist country with constitutional guarantees of energy subsidies may find difficulties in enforcing emission reduction targets that undermine those subsidies. These conflicts can lead to public and political resistance, affecting the practical implementation of international commitments. In dualist systems, international and domestic law operate as separate spheres. For international obligations to take effect domestically, they must be transformed into national law through legislative processes that is upon parliamentary approval. This ensures greater alignment with the domestic legal structures, but often results in significant delays. The decision in the McLean-Watson and Department of Trade and Industry 1989 demonstrates this idea, where the UK court reaffirmed that treaties hold no domestic effect without enabling legislation. Similarly, the Regina and Kane 1876 case underscored that international law cannot impose obligations domestically unless explicitly adopted through national legislation. Dualist systems offer the advantage of legislative scrutiny, ensuring that domestic priorities are considered when incorporating international commitments. However, this process is vulnerable to problems, particularly for politically controversial agreements like those on climate change. Such scrutiny often leads to significant delays and the risk of selective incorporation, where only parts of an agreement are adopted, diluting its overall effectiveness. This challenge is evident in the United States' fragmented implementation of the Paris Agreement, where state-level resistance has resulted in uneven progress, with some states advancing ambitious climate policies while others fall behind. These fundamental differences have direct effects for MEAs. While monist systems can swiftly enforce climate agreements, they may face legal challenges if international commitments conflict with domestic priorities. On the other hand, dualist systems often encounter delays in incorporating agreements, risking selective adherence and weakened compliance. The differences between monist and dualist systems create unique challenges in following international climate agreements. Combined with global issues, these challenges reduce the effectiveness of MEAs and weaken efforts to combat climate change. MONUS systems immediately incorporate international law upon ratification, eliminating the need for enabling legislation and allowing for swift application of MEAs. While this simplified process offers efficiency, it also introduces significant challenges. Legal conflicts often arise when international obligations clash with existing constitutional provisions or domestic laws. For example, Germany's integration of EU climate directives faced resistance from coal mining industries, delaying implementation. Additionally, the immediate applicability of international agreements might create judicial uncertainty, as courts may lack clear guidance on resolving conflicts with constitutional provisions. Furthermore, the immediate applicability of international agreements frequently provokes public and political backlash. Industries affected by emission reduction targets and citizens concerned about economic disruption may perceive these agreements as externally imposed, prioritizing global goals over local needs. A potential solution could involve constitutional amendments that clarify the supremacy of international obligations in specific areas, such as climate change, while maintaining domestic safeguards for economic stability. This would provide clearer guidance for courts and reduce resistance by addressing concerns over sovereignty and economic impacts. Dualist systems, on the other hand, require international agreements to be translated into domestic law through enabling legislation. This procedural separation allows for legislative scrutiny and alignment with local legal structures, but often results in significant delays. For instance, the UK experienced significant delays in incorporating the Kyoto Protocol, weakening its global leadership on climate change. Selective incorporation, where legislatures adopt only certain aspects of agreement, can weaken its overall impact by leaving critical provisions unimplemented. In addition, dualist systems often face political resistance when international obligations impose economic constraints on key industries. In the United States, the fragmented implementation of the Paris Agreement shows the challenges of the dualist system, with ambitious efforts by states like California contrasting with the reluctance of others, weakening overall federal commitments. Despite the differences between MONUS and dualist systems, nations face common challenges in implementing climate agreements. Developing countries often face resource restrictions, lacking the financial and technological means to achieve ambitious emission reduction targets. Without adequate international support, these nations struggle to fulfill their commitments. Weak enforcement mechanisms worsen the issue, allowing non-compliance to go largely unpunished and undermining the effectiveness of these agreements. MONUS systems enforce obligations quickly, but often face resistance and legal conflicts, while dualist systems encounter delays or incomplete implementation, both of which contribute to economic imbalances and weakening global efforts. Addressing these issues requires tailored solutions that take into consideration the specific needs of different legal systems, along with stronger global cooperation. Capacity building efforts and strong international oversight are essential to ensuring fairness, consistent adherence, and advancing collective action against climate change. Addressing the challenges of aligning international commitments with domestic legal systems and ensuring consistent compliance with climate agreements requires innovative, tailored solutions for both MONUS and dualist systems, supported by global initiatives to strengthen collective action. A unified framework for incorporating international agreements into domestic law is necessary to close the gap between MONUS and dualist systems. MONUS systems should introduce constitutional amendments or legal provisions that prioritize international obligations in specific areas such as climate policy, providing courts with clear guidelines for resolving conflicts. A constitutional override mechanism could ensure international responsibilities take priority in environmental cases. For dualist systems, fast-track legislative procedures mandating the incorporation of treaties within a fixed time frame after ratification would reduce the delays. A dedicated parliamentary committee for climate agreements could quicken the process and ensure timely implementation of commitments. Developing countries often face resource limitations that restrict compliance with international climate agreements. To combat this, wealthier nations and international organizations should expand funding mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund to provide financial assistance and technology transfers that support emission reduction initiatives. For example, a dedicated fund for renewable energy infrastructure could help low-income nations meet their climate commitments without compromising their economic development. Technology sharing agreements could further empower these countries to transition to renewable energy. Additionally, capacity building programs should be implemented to train policymakers, legislators, and judicial authorities in interpreting and enforcing international environmental agreements. By providing these stakeholders with the necessary knowledge and tools, countries can enhance domestic implementation and align their laws with global standards. Strengthening enforcement mechanisms within climate agreements is key to ensuring accountability and compliance. An independent oversight body could monitor each country's progress, providing regular compliance reports, and recommend corrective actions for nations that are falling behind. Additionally, incentives like trade benefits for compliant nations or penalties for non-compliance could encourage adherence. Regional agreements such as joint emission reduction initiatives or technology sharing programs could further enhance collaboration and assist countries in addressing domestic challenges while reinforcing global efforts. Public support is essential for implementing climate agreements effectively. Governments should run campaigns highlighting the local benefits of climate policies, such as improved air quality, job creation in green industries, and better energy security. These campaigns can build shared responsibility and reduce resistance, including businesses, NGOs, and local governments in planning and implementing domestic climate policies can also make them more practical and fair for the citizens. Public-private partnerships can encourage industries to adopt sustainable practices while minimizing disruptions, helping ensure climate policies are both effective and widely accepted. The successful implementation of international climate agreements depends on nations harmonizing their domestic legal systems with global commitments. Monosystems, while enabling quick implementation of international law, often face legal conflicts and public resistance. In contrast, dualist systems provide greater legislative scrutiny, but frequently encounter delays and selective adherence, undermining timely and complete compliance. Aside from these fundamental differences, shared challenges such as resource limitations, weak enforcement mechanisms, and fragmented global cooperation make meeting carbon reduction targets even more difficult. Addressing these issues requires a comprehensive approach, including legal reforms to improve compliance, capacity building programs to support resource-limited nations, and stronger international oversight to ensure accountability. Public engagement and technological advancements are also critical for fostering practical and sustainable solutions. Bridging the gap between international obligations and domestic realities is essential not only for the success of climate agreements, but also for combating climate change on a global scale. This is a legal and moral responsibility that must be met if future generations are to have a sustainable future. Thank you for joining me to explore how legal systems impact climate agreements. Together, we can work toward a sustainable future. This is Shafika Shafihi, signing off.